Today, I did some editing of the grid sketching article at memorised.com. And in amongst the different ideas for plotting things on maps, did a bit of editing and put in a new feature, plotting a country, where I use acrostics to try to express how to fill in each of these little squares of a world map, how much to fill them so that you get the rough idea of the shape of a country. So not this specific detail of the lines, but knowledge of which of these squares has got a bit of the country in it. It involves acrostics. So I have an acrostics article in this website, memorybloke.com, and I'm associating longitude and latitude with particular spelling ranges. So if a word falls between acupuncture and alarm, addition, aeroplane, affliction, I'd look across and say, oh, okay, that's to do with the square on the map that begins at longitude 173.33. And then I would need to know the latitude as well. And so I would look that up. Um, Within a different, uh, same acrostics words, but meaning latitude this time on a map. And the different fills to do on those little squares of the map are fill in none of a square, fill in a bit of a square, fill in about half of the square or a bit less, or fill in all or most of a square. And that's what led to the system which I'm going to demonstrate in this video. I did some vibe coding today and I made a program for drawing a map of a country, but it has to be on a grid where each side of a square is 10 degrees of the globe divided by 3. And by doing it that way, a very big country like France ends up being represented on what looks like 5 by 4 squares. And then the idea is to have an acrostic that says something about the state of each of the small squares. And there are 4 options. One of them is a square is empty. One of them is the square is about a quarter filled or less. If there's just a tiny bit of overlap, like over here, I'd probably just say that the square is empty, or just not even mention it at all if it's the final square. I can say that a square is either full or almost completely full. I can say that a square is about half full or more than a quarter full up to about half full. And in this way, I get some very vague information about how to draw the country. Like with this square here, saying that it's about a quarter filled in or less, that doesn't tell me whereabouts that quarter happens. However, as I start drawing and knowing that some of the squares are very filled in, it makes sense that whatever happens in the squares to the side of those are going to be stemming off from that center. I have an article about double-digit acrostics, and I worked out that I could use one prefix of an acrostic word to represent information about two left to right squares. So I could have an acrostic that means that a square is empty and the square next to it is empty. I could have an acrostic that means that a quarter-filled square has next to it an empty square. And so I could have two words of an acrostic sentence that effectively describe four squares. And I could have one sentence or phrase occur per row as a general rule. So when I get to the end of a sentence, it's typically meaning, oh, it's time to go to the next row for the next sentence, time to go to the next row for the next sentence. I also need a way to say where on a map of the world the 5x4 shape is happening. And do I even need to store the knowledge that it is 5x4, or perhaps through revision, it's obvious from just regular memory that it is a 5x4 shape. It's just a question of how much fill to put into each of those squares. And that's what I decided, that because a sentence implies a new line, it's going to be obvious or deducible that it is a 5x4 shape. So all I really need to do is to have an acrostic that says France is or has blah, 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 whatever the next bit is going to be telling me the longitude and latitude information. And so I worked out a way in which the first word after France is, or certainly the last two words of the sentence, the first of those two words tells you longitude, and the second of those two words tells you latitude. Where those words are acrostics that use particular prefixes. In summary, I could say France has a jolly man, where jolly man is longitude and latitude, so I would know where everything starts at. And then the prose that is included in the paragraph that starts off France has a jolly man, that would gradually give the detail of very broadly how to draw France as filled in pieces of each little square. I did some research because if each square represents a third of 10 degrees, to cover the 36 squares, the 36 10 degrees of longitude, that's 36 times 3, that's 108. But my acrostics only cover 100 spelling ranges. So 8 sort of third of 10 degree squares need to be removed from the system. So I just did some research where in the world doesn't have small countries in quite a longitude range. And there's an area in the Pacific Ocean that I just said I'll leave it off of my table of 100 acrostics, and which 3 1/3 degrees each of them corresponds with. With latitude, I learned that most countries of the world occur within a range, which kind of makes sense because they're not all in the North Pole and in the Antarctic. So I limited the range, and by doing that limiting of the range, I was able to use, say, 25 acrostic options of the 100 options And then when I get to the end of those, because they cover, let's say, 50 degrees of where most countries occur at, I was then able to loop and do another 25, and then loop and do another 25 acrostics, then loop and do another 25 acrostics ranges, so that all 100 acrostic spelling ranges get used, um, even though they're looping and just representing about 4 times different 10 divided by 3 squares within a narrow latitude region of the globe. So Europe, a lot of Africa, covering a confined latitude range. I can choose other countries as well. I just put European countries into this program, but I could have done African ones as well. A lot of countries are just going to occupy really one square, or in this case, maybe I would say that this one is about half of that square and a quarter of that square, less than a quarter of this one and that one, maybe. So look for something else. If a country is massive, it's out of scope of my work. I'm just really looking for a sort of 5 by 4, like France, or smaller. What's Spain going to be? Yeah, so Spain is a nice sized one. Portugal, I might even miss out detailing this one because it only just slightly spills over into that square. So I guess the longitude latitude would begin at this square and maybe be a one-word sentence before the second sentence is a row down and covers this square as well. It's been a very interesting exercise.